So we've heard from fellow ICL member Stan Vargas last spring. It was a very popular program that he put on, and I'm looking forward to hearing from him today. And I'm only going to mention a little bit of his background, which was on the screen earlier, because some of you are new ICL members. Okay, for the sake of the other people who want to hear, would just listen to me for a moment. Stan has a very interesting educational background as well as a work life, but he originally majored in biology, chemistry, and physics. Any one of those would have been a challenge, but he did them all three majors in science. And then was going to enter a doctoral program in medical microbiology, but bioethics steered him off into a sidetrack and got interested in comparative religion, and eventually got a doctorate in comparative theology. And that's what he's going to talk about today. Would you say comparative religion or comparative theology? Both. Is there both? Okay. And Stan was a teacher for most of his life, and I'm sure that that had some influence on his learning and postgraduate learning. But I'm not going to take any more time. He's got a lot to share with you. Please give him your ICL welcome.
For those of you who are hearing about you paid $165 to be able to hear these things, well, I've had people pay $200 to hear these lectures, so you're getting it at a discount. So there. I was going to become a microbiologist up until the time I was in Southern California. Now was about the time when they had the baby Faye, the heart transplant, the baboon transplant, and I was lucky enough to be picked for the ethics committee. So I was able to sit in on that. And like I explained last year, to be able to compare things, you have to be able to understand what they are. And in ethics, to be able to understand which view is prominent and dominant and should be the view, you have to understand all the other views, at least have listened to them. That's what drew me to comparative religion. I've always been religious. My dad was a pastor. My grandfather was a pastor. My uncle was a pastor. I was going to be a pastor, but then I thought, nah, how many pastors come to church dressed like this? And that was back in the 70s. Now they dress anyway. When I used to go to college, the professor used to have a suit and tie. Now he comes in shorts and before he's going to the beach. So what is comparative religion? Well, it's the comparison of different religions. That's kind of a non-starter there. The paper I gave you was just so you can watch and say, like, because there's a lot of things up here. And I've tried to highlight the words that I'm specifically going over, but then they're also on your paper there. You can take notes if you want. And my click doesn't work.
My guess is it's distance and line of sight. No?
Oh, I got it. It works. It's me that doesn't work. We were in the cafeteria eating, and somebody said, "We need to get back. It's almost your presentation." I said, "We still got 10 minutes." And it took me more than that to walk here. So, well, for those of you who were not here last year, I started the discussion by talking about the major world religions. And we got through some of them, and I'm continuing on right now. So for our definition of religion, we're going to call it how you look at the world. That's your religion. I got a lot of feedback last time, and people saying, that's kind of liberal. Religion is whatever you make of it. Yes and no, and I'll cover that today. Where did it all come from? What is my purpose in life? Where am I headed? What is my role in this life? What's in it for me? And I think all of these need to be addressed, especially the last one. What's in it for me? I think one of the things that we've been taught in our society is don't worry about you. You come last. God comes first. Family comes second. Nation comes third. Dog comes fourth. Where do I... It's led to a lot of suicides, a lot of depression. What's in it for me? Person's religion can be made of their own observations and deductions are shared from other people who seem to have found answers or handed them to in bulk by an organized group of people who have decided to think and act alike, or even given to them directly by God. However it is obtained or formed, a religion is how a person makes sense of everything. And that's where the 5 W's, and I put, oops, because the first one's an H. So I didn't want to take, four W's and an H, like 3 men and a baby. Well, what is religion? Popular views of religion. I hate religion. I hate religion. Love is my religion. Marijuana is my religion. My family is my religion. Well, people that, have good names. Abraham Lincoln, if it feels good, I do it. Mahatma Gandhi, God has no religions. And then one of the big thing is, God did not make religion, man made religion. Well, definitions in the dictionary of what religion is, I'd have to adhere to them, but it's not exactly on target. Dictionary definitions are made so that pretty much as many people as possible can agree with that. So the definition of a word, sometimes the word has nuances that are more than goes beyond the page of the dictionary. Okay, we're going to use the term religion to refer to the way a person looks at the world, how they see themselves in the world, how they see the universe. How, what, where, what, and what's in it for me. How many religions are there? Well, under the parameters we just said, it could be said that there's potentially as many religions as there are people. That's what they say about the Hindus in India. There are 10 billion Hindus in India. There are 10 billion people in India. There are 10 billion Hindus in India, all different. If religion is what you make of it, people of similar beliefs often join together for camaraderie and affirmation. They are now what we call an organized religion. So Catholicism, Christianity, Buddhism, Islam, those are organized religions made up of the religion of all the people. Join these together into a confederacy of sorts and you get what are called world religions. We have the Council of World Religions that meet at the UN. They have the auspices of the UN to not decide, but to look over the religions of the different parts of the world, indigenous religions especially, trying to make sure they don't get eaten up. But then again, maybe it's not what you make of it. Maybe you were riding your horse one day and lightning struck and said, Saul, what the heck are you doing to me? Or maybe you're in the forest and suddenly God appears to you. And you can't poo-poo those because you don't believe in that. There are so many that you have to understand that maybe there's something to it. Maybe God called you for a purpose. Maybe he called your group of people for a purpose. Mormons, Adventists, Jehovah's Witnesses, they feel that they were called. They didn't make this up themselves. They were called. They were given that information. They may have been given the message orally by dreams or visions or by written script. For example, the Jews have the Tanakh. There's the Christian Bible, the Book of Mormon, the Vedas, the Quran, the Upanishads, on and on and on and on. Where did that come from? Well, how do you know truth? How do you get truth? Well, here's what philosophers have come up with. There's different ways you can get an idea. You can imagine, I imagine it, I think that beyond Pluto, there's another star. How come? I just think so. Or, you know what? If there was another planet beyond Neptune, there probably is one beyond Pluto. Deduction. I just know. That's my 4-year-old nephew. If you give me your candy now, my candy now, I'll be happy. How do you know? I just know. Either that or I ain't gonna tell you. My nephew's 44 now, and we still kid him about that. Where are you going? I ain't gonna tell you. What's there? Good stuff. How do you know? I just know. Revealed, revelation. Especially in the later 200-300 years, many of the religions have been revelatory. They've been given to them. You've been revealed the truth. Joseph Smith was revealed where the plates were. Different people were revealed about the Sabbath. Different people were revealed that the time of the end is coming. How did they get that? Maybe by a dream, maybe by they just figured it out. Some way. Okay, what is comparative religion? Comparative religion is how we compare how the different religions look at different things. Doctrines, practices, and dogmas. A doctrine is a belief. This is what you believe. A practice is what you do. A dogma is, why do you do that? Because we say so. Why do you wear that? My pastor said I had to do that. That's a dogma. No reason for it. We decided that. Now, without naming specific religions, most of you know about some churches who they have peculiar beliefs, but it's just because they have decided. We have decided that priests should be celibate. Where is that in the Bible? We decided it. We decided it's the best way of doing things. And I'm trying to pick one that was very benign there, but why do we compare religions? To find out why they're so alike or why they're so different. How come being here in Oregon and those being in Papua New Guinea or in Soviet Russia, there's no Soviet Russia anymore, in Russia, why is it that the religions have so many similarities? Well, these are the religions that we are going to have studied. We've already done the ones on the left, the green ones, Zoroastrian, Hinduism, Judaism, Buddhism. So for those of you who were not here last year, this is what you missed. Christianity, Islam, and Sikhism. These are ones that are still part of that, but we didn't get to finish those, so I'll do those today. And probably the next hour, I'll be doing the folk religions. You can see that there's a lot more of those than there are of the world religions. Well, there's a lot less to tell. So, Christianity. This one's scary because everybody knows about Christianity. It's like saying, I'm going to tell you about marriage. And that's a hard one because everybody's been married. Everybody knows what works and doesn't work. Christianity. Well, Christianity is a religion that is based on the birth, life, death, and resurrection and teaching of Jesus Christ. It began in the 1st century as a Jewish sect. In fact, there was no 1st century. Even that word 1st century is based on Jesus Christ. He changed time. Before that, time was decided by the ruling party. So the day that Rome overthrew Jerusalem, that was day 1 of the year 1. The day that they took over Rome, that was that calendar. Different places had different calendars, which is why the Romans, seeing that they were controlling everything, you're going to do it my way, dogma. Well, that was kind of nice because everybody was now on the same calendar. Despite early persecution, Christians were not persecuted very early. It was the Jews that were persecuted very early. And the problem was, early Christians were Jews. They were Jewish people who saw the light of Jesus. So they were Jewish Christians. Christians believed that Jesus Christ was the Son of God, fully human and fully divine. Christians believe that Jesus died for humanity, that God raised him, and he'll come again. I'm speaking party line here. I'm not trying to convince you. Jesus is part of the Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. Okay? These actually make up the basic beliefs in Christianity. Hundreds of years later from there, you'll get the creeds, the Nicene Creed, the Apostles' Creed, Peter's Creed, Little Billy's Creed. You know, everybody should have candy. Everybody should give me some of theirs candy. That's a creed. Christians were monotheistic, which means they believed in one God. Proto-Christians. Proto means before. So before there were Christians, we had proto-Christians. What does that mean? These people, before they were called Christians, used to do this. They believed that they were inheritors of the Jewish Hebrew faith. The Jews messed it up. They didn't know him when he came. They did not see the majesty of Jesus. But we're going to take the stick and we're going to lead the people. They became spiritual Israel. So everything that Israel was given and promised, the Christians assumed that it was now theirs. This is known as supersessionism. They succeeded. They succeeded the Jewish faith. Everything that was Jewish was now Christian. How much more Jewish can you get from Abraham, Moses, Jacob, and David? Those are Jewish, hardcore. No, they're Christian. How come? Because they were Christian before they were Christians. Why? Because we say so. Well, there's ideas similar to that. For example, the divine right to rule. Certain families have the right to rule, which means they were now rulers of Russia and Germany and Spain and France and Italy and England, and they were all cousins because they were family. Also, if you didn't like the king, you can't kill the king, because if you kill the king, God will strike you down. Well, Christians believe that Jesus was the Messiah, a savior of humanity. Based on the Hebrew scriptures, but still, it wasn't quite the same as the Jewish Messiah. We had Yeshua, the Messiah. This was the promised one. Then we have Iesus, the Christ. In fact, Christ means Messiah in Greek. So if you were saying, in fact, Messiah is Hebrew for he who is anointed. So Messiah, if you were anointed to go throw the garbage, you were the garbage thrower. You have been anointed. You are the Messiah of trash. Well, Christ means the same thing. It means he who had oil poured over him. And for a long time, Paul had trouble getting people to follow his religion because I'm the one that preaches getting oil dripped on you. And the Greeks would say, why do you do that? Iesus, the Christ. A Christ is a Greek word, totally Christian, does not compare to Messiah. They're two totally different things. Messiah was a man, Christ was God. Then we had the mother of God, or the mother of Jesus, but they called her the mother of God. Theotokos. Theo, God, Tokos, the mother of. Theotokos. Right around the 1st and 2nd century, if Jesus was important, his mother must have been more important. She was really blessed. They believed in the incarnation of God. This is not the same as the Hindus or the Buddhists. The Hindus had avatars. So you had the main God, but he never came down to earth. He had avatars come in his place. Indira was an avatar of Brahman. But then tomorrow he may come back as another avatar. Well, Jesus wasn't just an avatar of God, he was God. He was God made meat, incarnate, carne, meat. As far as their basic ideas, Christians pretty much followed the party line, which was the Jewish line, Jewish beliefs. So what caused the universe, where did we all come from? They followed whatever Judaism said because they were Jews. When did it start? Well, it started in one of 4 times. 2000 BC, 6 BCE, 30 CE, or 327. It depends on what you look at it. So the year 2000 is when Judaism started, that's when Christianity started, because we know Judaism was just a precursor for Christianity. They were pre-Christians. Or 6 BCE, which is the year of Jesus' birth. Is that when Christianity started? Or was it 30 CE when he died and rose again? Or was it 35 when the Spirit of God came over the people? Or was it 325, the Council of Nicaea? Officially, it's 325. This is when Christianity became officially a religion. And then who made Christianity? Jesus never wrote anything. He gave a lot of speeches and he gave a lot of private talks, but he never said, I want you guys to go out and make me a church. He said, go out and preach, and he said, go out and teach and go out and heal, but he never said, I am God, I want you to go out and do this. In fact, most of what we know of Jesus or believe about Jesus came from Paul. Paul is the one who explained it for us. There's a lot of explaining to do. Well, he did a lot of explaining. Well, what's interesting here is there was some varied explainers. There was the Church of Rome, which was guided by Peter and James. They were the ones that led the Jewish Christians, the Jewish converts to Christianity. And Paul was a missionary. Paul went out there and did his thing. And maybe because of distance or because of the way they were raised or whatever, they taught different things. The Jerusalem church taught basically, we are still Jews, we are the new Jews. And Paul said, Jews schmooze, we are a whole new religion. We have a whole new God. So who was it that started Christianity? Well, from its very beginning, even Jesus' followers kind of argued between themselves. They said, he likes me more than you. I'm more important than you. I'm going to sit at the right hand of God. And there started to be little differences. Well, these differences and breaks are called schisms. They had small disagreements of who was the greatest. One of the first, or the strongest schisms at the very beginning of the church was the antinomians against the Judaizers. Antinomians means no rules. There are no rules. Obviously, this is Paul. Paul said, you are no longer covered by the law. You are better than the law. The law was made for you, not you for the law. The Judaizers were the ones where, obviously, they believed we are still Jews. We are still the recipients of the promise made to Abraham. Well, and there's the definitions at the bottom there if you want to. And a lot of these slides I go through quickly, and one of the reasons is you can always go back on the YouTube and look at them at your leisure and say, yeah, I didn't get to read that before. James in the Jerusalem church and Paul, apostle to the Gentiles. Words were said. They said, you're stupid, your hair's funny, you're going to hell, you're going to hell. And finally, they were about to tear the baby Christian church apart. Well, they were saved by death. This is when the Jews rebelled against the Romans again. 70 AD, 70 CE. The Jews rebelled against the Romans again. This time Rome said, you know what, I've had it. And they just totally obliterated Jerusalem. As some of the historians say, not one rock was left upon another rock. They destroyed. I was always interested of, if Jerusalem was mostly made out of rock, how did they burn it down? They did. The only Jews that were able to survive, and Christians, were the ones that left. They left as refugees. Where did they go? Yes, everywhere. Every rock and cranny where they could hide from the Romans. Obviously, the towns and cities around Jerusalem weren't happy to have them, which was very interesting because most of the towns and cities around Jerusalem were not Jewish. They were what you would call now Palestinian. They're Arabs. They especially, this animosity between Jews and Palestinians has gone a long, long way. And with one swift battle, the Jerusalem church ceased to exist. There was only one game in town now, Pauline Christianity. Well, the Roman Empire was the main power, and they decided everything, what you ate, where you went to church, who you married. In the first century, Rome was heavily influenced by the Greeks and emperor worship. Emperor worship is the one that we hear of the most. It was law, it was decreed that you had to give a token sacrifice, usually food or meat sometimes, in honor of the emperor. That's all you had to do. You didn't have to bow. You didn't have to go to his church. You didn't have to believe in him. You simply had to do your civic duty. In fact, the idea of civic duty is where most of the Jews and Christians were killed. They weren't killed for their religion. They were killed for their civil disobedience. They were harming the plurality of Rome, that everybody was part of Roman society, regardless of where you came from, what your religion was. You were simply saying, yay, to the emperor. For this reason, Rome contained many temples, shrines, and places of worship. Most forms of worship were tolerated. Rome was one of the most tolerant empires in history. They didn't care what religion you were, as long as you worshiped the emperor. The Christian converts in Rome were likely to have been of Jewish origin. Well, King Claudius, Emperor Claudius, was one of the main persecutors of Jews, of which Christians were a group of them. And he kept destroying it. And again, the Christian church might have been wiped out. But except for Constantine. Constantine, the son of Constantius, who followed Claudius. The whole history there. Constantine became emperor of all of Rome. And in honor of him believing that it was God who laid the pathwork for his emperorship, he declared all Christians were cool. They could buy things, they could own properties, they could do this and do that. He wasn't necessarily endorsing the religion itself, but he endorsed them as people. They were honorable people. They were people who paid their I don't want to say tithe, their taxes. But there was still an argument going on in the church. There's always an argument going on in the church. And there was a huge argument going on now. Homoousion as compared to homoousion. Yeah, when I was in graduate school and we learned about that, we couldn't figure out which was which. Well, one basically says that Jesus was of the same essence as God. He was God. The other one says he was similar to God. He was almost like God, but he was not God, because there's only one God. Well, people from Egypt, Alexandria, people from Nicaea, people from Jerusalem. When I say people, I mean theologians, Christian theologians, were always arguing to the point of killing each other. So Constantine finally said, enough is enough. I want you guys to get together, and I want you guys to decide this out. Well, this is known as a synod, S-Y-N-O-D. This is a gathering of the different forces or the different ideas. And there's been many synods held in the Christian church. Synods mostly is held now by Catholics, but even Protestants have conferences. Every 4 years they have the general conference. That's a synod. A synod is a congregation, a meeting together of. Then Constantine moved the capital to Byzantium. Bad move. Well, one of the reasons it was a bad move is because the Pope, the Bishop of Rome, the Christian bishop, there was still not a church, Christian church, but he had so much power. So when Constantine moved the church, that's another interesting word right there, the church. What do you mean, the church? The church to us has a magical greatness to it. The church, 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 church. Get it, the echo? The church, the church, the church, the church. What is the church? Well, interestingly, according to even Catholic theologians, and I'll get back to these in just a second. There it is. Even though the date of the official schism is break, no, I lied. It's not it. The part I'm getting to is there's a theologian, Catholic theologian, that says there is no Catholic Church. There's simply the church. And there is no Protestant church. They are simply renegades of the church. They are simply the church doing it wrong. There is no churches. Well, a lot of Protestant smaller denominations still feel the same way. Adventists, Seventh-day Adventists will say, well, the church is doing this, and Baptists, yeah, the church is coming to the end here, and they don't mean Christianity, they mean Baptists. They mean Jehovah's Witnesses. They mean our group. So this word, the church, was hard to pin down, but it suddenly became powerful in itself. Well, the church in Constantinople, which was now the name of Byzantium, there had to be a bishop there. And since he was in the capital, Constantine had to give him all the pomp and circumstances, and he had to give him all his power and gold and temple and this and that. And there was now an argument between the Constantinople church and the Roman church. They were both the pontiff. They were both the vicar of Christ. But now there were two. So which one do you follow? Well, moving back here a little bit, there's at least 30 independent Catholic groups. When we say Catholic, Catholic is simply a Latin word which means all together now. Catholic means the congregated or the grouping of. So the Catholic Church means the grouping of all the Christians. Well, the difference between Christian churches became, how do you do how do you do your worship? Do you serve the wine first, or do you serve the bread first? Do you sing after, or do you kneel down? Or do you have your left hand behind your back? Or do you preach in front of the pulpit or behind the pulpit? Different one. These are known as rites. The way that you do your details of your liturgy is called a rite. There came to be known 6 rites, 6 different rites, even now. The split between the Western and Eastern Christian churches became known as the Great Schism, the Great Dividing. This was one that couldn't be fixed. There was a division, and we had the Eastern Church and the Western Church, also known as the Oriental Church and the Roman Catholic Church, or the Orthodox Church and the West. I mean, this and them. Which was which? I don't know. They don't know. Which is more important? I don't know. Who do we follow? Whichever. But that wasn't good enough. They went to battle. Each of them said, but my Uncle Bob, bless his soul, who died, believed this. And he was a good guy. And he's in heaven right now. I'm gonna follow what he did. And my great uncle Nick, he was also a good guy. And he like even died at the church. He was a saint. Well, that's where saints came in. Saints were very outwardly holy people who Christians then believed were in heaven now. They were known as saints. And since they were in heaven now, they must be alive. And since they're good people, they must want to help us. So if we give them a message and say, hey, Uncle Bob, I'm kind of hurting here, he'll go to God and say, I got a cousin or a nephew, and he's kind of, but, can you help him? This is basically what a saint is. Somebody that you would go to intercede between you and God. A little bit different than some of the other things we've heard of, where they're not worshipped, they're simply meant to be emulated and try to follow the straight and narrow like they did. Patron saints, who is your saint? I don't have one. Get one. So we have personal saints and we have group saints. Saint Christopher seems to be a saint of a lot of different groups. Saint Paul. The sacred texts of the Christianity is the Holy Bible, made up of the Old Testament and the New Testament. Testament, Christian word. Testament means a promise. So there was 2 promises. The promises made to Abraham by God, and the promises made to modern man made by Jesus. 2 different things. But since we are the opposite of ancestor, Jews were ancestors of Christians, so Christians are descendants of Jews. Everything they were, we are. Everything they had, we had. So, okay, the Old Testament is Jewish, but it's ours now. So when they were talking about Abraham, Abraham was simply a proto-Christian. So whatever promises God made to Abraham, he was like making it to be a Christian. There's also 2 other kinds of Bibles. We have the Apocrypha and we have the Pseudo-Apocrypha. The Apocrypha means hidden. These are hidden books. When we say hidden, yeah, they were like not looked at when the Bible was being put together. Pseudo-apocrypha, pseudo, false, apocrypha, epigraph, signature. They were false identified. They were like books that said, I am Paul and I'm writing this book. Lies. It was written in 1800. It couldn't have been Paul. Pseudo-apocrypha. Many churches now, and again there's that word churches, have their own scripture as well. They very smartly don't put it on the same level as the Bible, but still it's scripture to them. Mormons, they believe in the Bible, but they also believe in the Book of Mormon. And they also believe in the Pearl of Great Price. And Mary Baker Eddy's followers, they also follow her book. And even Catholics will follow the book of their patron saint. The most important norm in Catholic biblical interpretation is the authentic tradition of the church. Why do you get to decide? Because we're the church. Who made you the church? We've always been the church. We are the church. Why are you asking us who's the church? We're the church. We decide. Why? Because we're the church. And in fact, a lot of that you have to give them credit because it is the Catholic Church who actually decided which books were going to go into the Bible. The final declaration of what books were canonical was made in the Council of Nicaea, 325. So along with deciding that Jesus was God, they also decided, and also this book should be in there, and this book should be canonical, and this book is sacred and spiritual, and that one's not. So to a certain degree, they made which books should be in there. So if they decided which books should be in there, they should have deciding power of what it means. Why did you put it in there? Because of this. This is known as the magisterium, the right to be the daddy, the right to decide. Others were beginning to see that, you know what, why? It's not fair. What right do you have to lead? And the hierarchy of the Catholic Church, the church, would say, because we're the leaders of the church. What made you the leaders of the church? The Bible. But you made the Bible. Yes. And how did you make the Bible? We decided because we're the church. Finally, there were some people who said, you know what? I don't believe that. I believe that we should all be able to make our own choices. We should all be able to make our own interpretations. In fact, I don't like the way you decide things. So they made a protest, hence the word Protestant. They're the protesters. Most of this started in Europe. In Germany, it was Martin Luther. But there are others. There were Wycliffe and there were Tyndale. There are other people in Europe coming to the same conclusion at the same time. These were the heretical Christians. They were heretics. And now we say, no, they weren't heretics, they were Protestants. Well, they were heretics. Because the definition of the word heretic means those who don't follow the party line. Those who don't follow the ideas put forth by the authorities. They are heretics. And yes, they were heretics. So these heretical Christians had to be addressed. So Rome put out papal bulls, which are letters of condemnation. They had more synods, and they were more words, and this and that and that. Finally, there was no compromise, and the church again tore in half. We had the Protestant churches and the Catholic churches. This is known as the Great Reformation. And then there was some that said, you know what? we agree with the Catholic Church, but they're doing baptism wrong. You shouldn't baptize babies. You should baptize adults when they know. You should do this, you should do that. Well, one of those examples were these Anabaptists, which led to Baptists, the Mennonites. They believed in what's called the priesthood of all believers. We are all priests. Now here's something we can go back from last year. What is a priest? A priest is somebody who stands between you and God. He is your go-between. He is your speaker. He's your lawyer. So even in ancient Israel and the religions then, there were priests, and that's how you came to speak before God. You brought a sacrifice to the priests, and then they would say, okay, God, this guy brought you a lamb. He probably deserves this. This guy brought you a pigeon. Don't give it to him yet, but kind of keep him priests. Also in ancient Judaism, priests were a political position. They were elected by the priests. The priests were like a family. And who was going to be priests for the next 5 years? They would elect who would be. And they would usually be some of the wealthy families. They were not hereditary anymore. You got money? You could be a priest. You could be the head priest. The priesthood of all believers. I don't need a priest. I am my priest. I can go to God on my own. He can see me and I'm not destroyed. I can see him and he cares for me. The priesthood of all believers. In this case, they could make their own interpretations, and it was valid. Well, from there, we got a lot of denominations. And what's the difference? How they interpret the Bible. That's it. How they interpret the Bible. Well, they all believe in the Bible, or let me rephrase that. They all believe in the authority of the Bible, but what does the Bible mean? Well, one church believes one thing, and another church says, and the main differences lies in biblical interpretation. Basically, Christianity now is divided into three parts: the Roman Catholics, Protestants, and Orthodox. Here we get this is what you would study if you're in graduate school in religion. Have to memorize these. And sacred time. These are the sacred times in Christianity. When Jesus was born, when he was baptized, when he died, and when he came back. And again, this is almost the creed of Christianity. We believe in the birth of Jesus. Interesting things that happen around the world during these times. One of the most holy times is the what's called the Holy Week. Holy Week, different places of the world, either starts with Easter or ends with Easter. Most places it ends with Easter. And they reproduce what happened to Jesus. They go through the different stages. New Mexico, this is especially noticeable because you'll see them walking down the highway in the middle of nowhere. 200 people in line, carrying crosses, bleeding, barefoot. They're called los penitentes. The penitents, I don't know what this is in English. These are the ones who are making penance. There's also the church, Christian church has sacraments. Sacrament is something that you do to obtain grace. You are paying for something. So one of those would be baptism. That would be one of the most obvious. The Holy Supper, the Eucharist. Then there would be marriage. There would be confirmation. Well, there's 7 altogether in the Catholic Church. Protestant churches have the same thing, but usually they only have like 1 or 2 of them. Specifically, usually baptism and marriage. Those are two sacraments.
No, it's not marriage.
Not marriage? Okay, so baptism? And communion sometimes, because I was going to get to baptism, in a lot of churches, you don't even have to be baptized to become part of their church. Profession of faith, I believe. Okay, that's good enough. Eucharist, the Holy Supper. There's the problem between some people saying, Jesus said, this is my body, take it. And other people say, do this in remembrance of me. So is it a command, or is it a this is a good idea? So Protestants are kind of confused on what they believe. Okay, so what happens? Heaven or hell? Well, if you ask somebody about heaven or hell, basically it's formulated answers. Well, if you go to heaven, you get to live with Jesus, and you get to strum violins, harps, and you get to, which is different than Muslims. Muslims get to dance with virgins and drink all the wine they can drink. Basically, it's a good place. It's a happy place. But bad people go to hell. But Christians don't say hell. Bad people go. Good people go to heaven as a deserved reward. The pearly gates, on and on and on. And bad people go to hell because that's what they chose. Almost all Christian denominations try to push that it is your choice. You want to be stupid? Be stupid. It's a free country. You want to go to hell? Go to hell. Now, we have extremists who say, no, I love my brother. I'm not going to let him go to hell. I'm going to fight for him to not go to hell. So what do? They kill people who are killing babies. They kill people because they're heretics, the Spanish Inquisition. And they do it all in love, because they love you and they don't want you to go to. And they don't want you to go to for killing babies. So I will take the burden on myself. I will kill you. And that took 50 minutes, 50 minutes. And we will leave Islam till afterwards. That's how I ran my classes when I was in teaching. Okay, feel free to sit down and shut up now. Yeah, feel free to, if you would like, park it. So much more I could have gone over about Christianity. I really didn't even go over many of their beliefs. Pretty much their structure, how they came to be. A lot of these other religions that we're going to keep doing now go a lot faster because I go faster. I don't know. Islam. The word Islam, salam. Salam is actually the name of God. Salam means this God. Just like in Hebrew, we have the word for God, which is El. And then if you're talking about a specific God, you could call that God Bel. So a lot of times in Scripture you read about El Shaddai, El Elyon Adonai. But don't go to Bel. Bad people go to Bel. That's probably what they call it. No. Islam. The meaning of Islam, even though the definition is something, the meaning of Islam is to submit. In fact, one of their main phrases is inshallah. if God wills it. So we'll see each other tomorrow, inshallah. God willing. We say that a lot in Christianity too. If it's God's will. Islam is the religion of the Muslims. A lot of times when I was growing up, it was called Muslimism or Mohammedism. I wasn't even into college before I heard the word Islam. Muslims. A monotheistic faith regarded as revealed through Muhammad as the prophet of Allah. Most of what we know about Islam is from writings, obviously. The Quran being one of the main ones. The Quran means recite. The Quran means to recite. And what happened here is there was a man, Muhammad, and he was a camel driver, stinky, and he was married, one wife. Some have even said he was minimal Christian, which means he believed in God. He knew about David, he knew about Abraham. He got married to a rich lady, Khadijah. And about when he was in his 40s or 50s, he began to have visions. What's interesting here is, when you say that one of your supposed prophets went into visions, the first thing people start saying is, epilepsy. She must have had epilepsy. He must have been on drugs. He must have hit his head somewhere. He was crazy. Maybe Muhammad was too. But either way, he dreamt that he had an angel of God telling him, okay, this is important. And he would tell him, and then he would say, okay, what did I say? You said that Allah is the main God. Okay, that's the recite. Recite to me over. Even in Christianity, especially in Catholicism, we have recitations, recitar. This is the hours or the prayers that they do at Mass, are the prayers they do for penance. They are recitations. Most religions don't pray to God from themselves. They don't say, "Dear God." They say, "We believe in God the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost." And then sometimes as fast as you can say it is good enough because it all works the same. And if you say it 5 times, then you're done. Can I go play now? Recite. Here is interesting because Muslims believe that they're the followers of Christianity. Things were promised to the Jews, but they screwed up. Christians tried to fix it, but they screwed up. So finally God said, okay guys, here's one last chance. So he went to Muhammad and he said, okay, I want to tell you again. In this case, write it down, make sure you know it. And don't change the language. If you have any arguments about whether the Bible means this or that, a lot of times it has to do with, well, it depends on how you translate that word. It depends on whether you translate love to mean erotic love or brotherly love, or it depends on what you're. And it's especially hard for English speakers who don't speak Hebrew or Greek. Yeah, you can get a 4-year college degree in Hebrew literacy and Greek literacy, and so you can read the originals. Most people are not there. Most people don't care that much. They want to know the truth, but not that bad. I have a life. In fact, I've been told sometimes that somebody from the audience will say, like, well, you know what? You're not saying anything special. I could have gone to college and got a 4-year degree in religion. Well, yeah, you could have. But if I think I have to get a 4-year degree to be able to understand and explain it to you, I don't understand it and I can't explain it to you. You need to be able to make it simple. Well, in this case, God, the angel, told Muhammad, and don't translate it. So now, the only real Quran is in Arabic. Not only that, but they don't read the Quran. They memorize the Quran, which is where you get Islamic schools where you see children and adults just reading and reading and reading and speaking and speaking. They're memorizing. And you get these holders of the truth. Literally. You can ask them, what does the Quran say about this? It says, and they can spit it right at you. They know their Bible. Well, in this case, they know their Quran. Most people don't really know that there are more holy books than there are books that are as holy as the Quran. They're not more holy than the Quran. But we have them in the left here. The Taurat, the Zabur, the Injil, and the Quran. Obviously the Quran. The Taurat, also known as the Torah, written by Moses. Islams feel that this is holy scripture. Again, the problem is, these stupid white people, they changed the language into, we want to change it into Fijian, we want to change it to Japanese. It has totally different meanings now. So they read that in either the Hebrew or in Arabic. Psalms, they believe in Psalms, some of the Psalms. So of all the Psalms, they believe in about 2/3 of them. Only the ones that were written by David. The Gospel of Isa. Arabic for Jesus. The words of Jesus. But Jesus never wrote anything. Well, this is like getting a red letter edition of the New Testament where only the words of Jesus are in red so that you can know what Jesus said and not. This they would hold holy as well. So we have those 4 books there. The average Muslim doesn't know this even. They know that they believe in the Quran, and then there are other books that kind of add to it. 2 of those main books are the Hadith and the Sunnah. The Hadith is a collection of traditions containing sayings of the Prophet Muhammad. This is almost like a book of Confucius. Confucius say, he who has a penny. This is the Hadith, things that Muhammad said. The Sunnah this is what Muhammad did. And Muhammad would get up in the morning and he would wash his face. Not that you have to do that, but that's what a good Muslim would do. You get up and you wash your face. Why? Because Muhammad did it. And Muhammad was a good guy. So if you want to be good, you got to wash your face. So these are also books that educated Muslims will make use of. Every average Muslim probably does not even know this. The ones from Sudan, the ones from jungle, prairie, desert regions, they just know that they were conquered by the Arabs and they were left with Islam and follow the Quran and that's it. Oh yeah, you can have a lot of wives. They remember that too. There are 5 pillars or 5 basic beliefs in Islam. 5 things you have to do. They are the declaration of faith, prayer, charity, fasting, and the pilgrimage. La ilaha illallahu. Muhammad la Rasulullah. That is the Shahada. I am now Muslim. Because that's how you become a Muslim. The only thing you have to do to become a Muslim is to say the Shahada. By saying the Shahada, you have said, there is no God but God, and Muhammad is his prophet. Now, except for the fact that English doesn't count in Islam, that's almost as good. La ilaha illallahu, Muhammad la Rasulullah. La ilaha illallah, Muhammad ur Rasulullah. Notice the second paragraph. And a Christian may also add, and I bear witness that Jesus is the servant of Allah, his messenger, and his word which he gave to Mary, and a spirit from him. Jesus was cool. Jesus was from God. Was Jesus God? Sorry, I can't even use the cross. Don't say that. There is only one God, and he is God. Prayer. It is mandatory for a Muslim to pray 5 times a day, facing Mecca. There is a recitation that they do, and they do it all together. Charity, zakat, it is the law that you have to give to the poor. Some Christian churches do it as tithing or offering. They do it as individuals. It doesn't have to be money, though. Notice in the left bottom corner, sometimes you go to the poor and you feed the poor. Fasting. Fasting is done during Ramadan. Ramadan is a calendar month, the month of Ramadan. And during that time, it is decreed that you have to fast and you have to pray. Fasting goes on from daybreak to sunset. You cannot eat. After that, you say, it's over. And they have a feast, the festival of breaking fast, every day. Pilgrimage, the Hajj. I've personally known 20 people who went to the Hajj, and you can describe it, you can tell, and they talk about taking the airplane, and a certain number of airplanes are leased by the Saudi Arabian government to take people to Saudi Arabia where the Hajj is, and they have all kinds of things they have to go through. It is a requirement that anybody financially able to do has to do the Hajj. These are buildings and tents in Saudi Arabia. They come in, the one on the left here I think is the airport. You notice that they're almost all in white. The black, I'm not sure why they're in black, but I know there's a different sect. The tents, there's a tent city there, and they all have their air conditioning. They go to this huge stadium, and right in the middle there, well, it's not in the middle here, but you see the big black box, and that's what they have to surround. They go around that big black box in a circle, and they slowly go around, and sometimes they'll pick up rocks and throw it at it, and like if they're throwing rocks at Satan. In the middle of the box, inside the box, is that rock on the right bottom corner. Scientists have tried to discover if that's a natural earth rock or if it's a meteorite, but Muslims believe that this is a rock that was put on earth for the sole purpose of Abraham later to attempt to sacrifice his son. So they hold that this is the actual rock that Abraham was going to sacrifice his son at. On the left here would be a slow day. On a busy day, you would be shoulder to shoulder. head to mouth. And if somebody were to yell, fire, and everybody was to, all on its own, you're on your own here, and you can have hundreds, if not thousands of people trampled to death. I think this happens like every 4 or 5 years. We hear in the news that 1,200 people were stampeded to death on the Hajj, and mostly because of these tunnels. And you see how many people are there. Muslims believe that when the world ends, God will judge all people. Again, they take after Christianity and Judaism. Those who have obeyed God will enter paradise, and those who have not won't. They don't eat pork, similar to Jews. Women have fewer rights than men. You have to participate in the jihad, which is a holy war, which is where we get to other things. Kosher. Kosher is a Jewish system of clean foods. Muslims have the same thing. It's called halal. If you go to restaurants or stores, grocery stores, you'll see a lot of foods that have the halal symbol on them on the left bottom corner there. That means they are kosher. Well, halal is actually more stringent than kosherness, kashrut. And you can see there on the right bottom, there are animals that neither can eat, but some can eat, and both can eat. Halal can eat rabbit, Jews cannot. Mecca is the heart of Islam. That's where people go to in the Hajj. This is where Muhammad was born. What else is important about Mecca? The place where Muhammad was born. Other things that they celebrate in Mecca, the place where Muhammad is born. That's it. I mean, it's a city out in the middle of nowhere, and it happened to be one of the cities that Muhammad fought over when he was becoming stronger. Medina, this is like a holy city because this is where Muhammad took off on his nightly journey. We'll get to that in a minute. And he went to Jerusalem. So a magic horse and an angel took him from Medina to Jerusalem. This is known as the Isra and the Miraj. Isra is the night journey, and while he was in Jerusalem, they believe that God took him up into heaven, which isn't much different than a lot of the other religions where we believe that God took him up and said, okay, this is the seventh heaven, this is the third heaven, and this and that and this and that. He was transported by his servant by night from the inviolable house of worship at Mecca to the remote house of worship at Jerusalem. There's two major sects of Islam, Shiites and Sunnis. Okay, this is what happened. Muhammad lived. Muhammad died. Who's going to follow in Muhammad's footsteps? Well, some of his closest friends said, well, duh, it should be his son. It should be a hierarchy based on the family, the oldest. It should be Ali. And some other people said, like, Muhammad didn't even like Ali. Just because he's blood doesn't mean that he should be the next leader. We believe that Abu Bakr must be the next leader. So that's where they started to fight. The Shiites believed Muhammad's true successors were the descendants of his daughter and son-in-law. Shiites believed that they were divinely inspired. They were chosen by God. The Sunnis, on the other hand, believed that any good Muslim could become a leader or caliph, and that this caliph was a political leader, not a divinely inspired prophet. So in Shiites and Shiaism, the priest is the leader of the people, and forget the priest. The religious leader is the political leader. In Sunni, the religious leader and the political leader are two different things. They try to get along like the prime minister and the president, but they're not the same person. Both branches believe in the same God, and they follow the 5 pillars of Islam and study the Quran. However, they differ in daily practices and have often fought over wealth and political issues. Most Shiites live in Iran, Lebanon, Yemen, and Iraq. And I have heard that Iraq was mostly Sunni, but I don't know. About 90% of Muslims today are Sunnis. Their sacred times, the day of Ashura. This is when Ali died, Muhammad's grandson. They take celebration to an extreme. They beat themselves, kind of like the Christians did at Easter time. They do penance. But in this case, it's no personal penance. It is simply as an honor to remember this person. Then we have the Sufis. The Sufis were began by a person called Rumi. Rumi was like Ferdinand, if you remember the story of Ferdinand, the bull who wanted to smell flowers instead of attack matadors. Well, Rumi was a poet. And one of the things that he taught his followers was the sema. The sema is the dance. The most famous people who do this dance are the whirling dervishes. The dervish is a tribe, and they whirl, and they go round and around and around. Many people, or many sources say that this is a form of worship. This is a form of prayer to them. And where do you go afterwards? Well, if you want to go to heaven, Jannah, that's the Arabic term for heaven. Jannah. This is the afterlife. The righteous will be amid gardens and fountains of clear flowing water. This is similar to and I saw up in heaven a great city with 4 gates and stuff like that. Every religion has this. What happens when you die? Well, let me tell you. If you don't follow the party rule, you go to hell. Interestingly, most people in hell are women. Which is why those 2 prophets, are looking down at the shameless women, being punished in hell for exposing their hair to the sight of strangers. Okay, in that case, this is how Islam sees themselves. They're from the tree of Abraham. And Isaac and Ishmael, 2 sons of Abraham. Isaac became Jacob, and they became the 12 tribes of Israel, of one of which is Judaism. Judaism, Jews, which were only one tribe of the 12 tribes because they lived in Judah. Because they lived in Judah, they were known as Jews. People who lived in Dan or some of the other places, tribes, were called that. The people who lived in Samaria were called Samaritans, but they were still part of Israel for a long time. Well, Christianity, as you can see here, I told you before that we had Judaism, and then Christianity, and then Islam. Well, this is kind of like saying the same thing here. And again, if you want to get technical about it, some of these names you probably have heard in some way or the other. Notice on the second Shia, going down from there, you have the Druze. We have Druze Muslims in Lebanon. And they were important for the civil war in Lebanon. There's another one here I wanted you to see. I can't find it. Okay. Radical Islam, also known as political Islam. They are ones that are obsessed. Now, we're going to finish Islam today. And then my next lecture, whenever it will be the home religions. And then after that, I have a talk about fundamentalism. How did they become that way? Are you fundamentalist? Well, fundamentalist is a bad term right now. But these people are fundamentalists. They're obsessive about their beliefs, and they will follow those beliefs to their death. Radicalized. That is, they have undying allegiance to Ummah, Khalifa, Sharia, and Jihad, all of which have become excessively politicized. Ummah, this is the nation. They believe that Muslim people have suffered because of their nation. Jews have the same belief. They are a persecuted nation. Well, Muslims feel the same way. So for that reason, many Muslims nowadays, when you talk to them, they have victimhood and they're a persecuted group. Khalifa comes from caliphate. This is the belief that we need to make religious countries. We need to make a place where it is safe to be Islamic. You heard that before in Mormonism. You've heard that before in Judaism, Israel. You've heard that before in a lot of other religions. So it's nothing new. It's nothing peculiar to Islam. And they call this country a caliphate. Obviously, a caliphate is led by a caliph. Sharia. Sharia is law. It's like the Ten Commandments, but more. It's like Catholic canon law. Many books. And they are duty-bound to implement and enforce medieval Islamic jurisprudence. This is like saying, suffer not a witch to live. So it is our duty to go and kill witches, because the Bible says so. The Bible says two men should not lie together. And if they do, kill them. Etc., etc., etc. But nowadays we kind of look at that and say like, it was that time, and it was their culture and their beliefs. And well, they believe, these people, that Sharia is Sharia. God didn't give it to us so we could decide, oh, I like this law and I don't like that law. Jihad, they take jihad to mean to fight for Islam. And when they say fight, they mean fight the world. Some people believe that jihad means to fight within yourself, to get rid of your selfishness, to get rid of your greed, to get rid of your things that make you want to be special and greater than others. Bottom left, wake up, America. Jihad is on the march around the world. This was put out, I think, by one of our dear beloved presidents. Interesting poster here. If they would only understand that Islam will dominate. The Holy Quran teaches us that where we put our feet, we shall rule that land. It's that simple. Here's where I was saying that the word jihad does not mean holy war. It actually means a holy struggle. There are many forms of jihad. But it's not just Muslims who do this. Womankind, world domination. America's global domination. History of Louisiana, the American domination. Embracing the American domination. Manifest destiny. It is our God-given right to own the whole America. But what if there's people in the way? Kill them. Which ones do we kill? Kill them all. God will take those that he wants. Whoa. That gave them all the reason in the world to kill all the American Indians. A fundamental Christian ideology is called dominionism. Dominionism seeks to overthrow democracy and transform America into a biblical theocracy. This is also known as Christian Reconstructionism. Basically, it means the Muslims are out to get us. We need to defend the Christian empire, which is where you have your separate militias, Washington militia, sometimes led by white supremacists, but not always. Sometimes they're Christian supremacists. And that's the end. In this case, we have 15 minutes. You want to do questions?
Hi, Karen. Is Sharia law written down in the Quran?
The basics of Sharia law are in the Quran. From there, it's expanded in the other writings, like the sayings of Muhammad, because the sayings of Muhammad are similar to the Judaic hadiths, the writings of the sayings of the elders. I can't remember what you call it. Both religions have explanations. So the Quran says you shouldn't kill people. Well, what does that mean? Well, the other books, Muslim books, talk about, well, who is my brother? What does kill mean? What does, how long do you have to kill somebody?
But you said they were supposed to do that. You said that the Quran was it, and they were supposed to interpret it like people did.
Interpret means, in this case, I mean translate it. They're not allowed to translate it into a different language. But still, I would think, personally, it's human nature to be able to, what does that mean? Well, it means, in fact, we still get that from some of the imams from Iran. They will put down a rule that says, okay, I say this person should die because he committed fornication. Well, he put down a rule. He did it, but it was based on Sharia law, based on the Quran. I think that's the best I can answer that.
Oh, yeah, this is Ed. I'm wondering about the controversy of what was put in the Quran, and is it all original, or was it added because Muhammad, there's a controversy about he didn't write some of that stuff, and it was changed and it was added to. And then the old history about Thomas Jefferson and the Islam and the fight in Tripoli, and there's and the supposed assassination of Muhammad. Those things are a lot of unanswered questions that may never be solved.
I think a lot of those questions are similar to, was Jesus married? Or was Jesus actually killed? Or was he taken away? There are good questions, but there's no way to answer them. The only way I can answer this or give credence to it is said, the angel came to Muhammad and spoke into his ear. And he said, repeat it to me. Muhammad never wrote anything. Muhammad then went to his followers and he told them, and they memorized it. They repeated it and memorized it. it wasn't until 2 or 3 generations later that they started to write it down, because some people were starting to forget or mix it up with something else. So they said, let's write it down. And as I understand, it was almost, or if not all, word for word from what the angel had told Muhammad. Now, is that a fairy tale, and did the people actually forget and kind of like put in a sentence where they knew they'd forgotten something, and or did they say, we don't like this virgins thing, so they changed it into wives, and you know, did they change it? Possibly, and I don't know. I know that there have been people famous for other things that had tried to answer this, including Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson believed in Christianity, but he believed that most of the Bible was rubbish. So he took out verses that he didn't like, and he finally came up with what's called the Jefferson Bible. And the Jefferson Bible is his interpretation of what was important in the Bible. And I've heard that he, along with others, also did research into the Quran to see if, was it the original or was it Memorex? Don't know. And that's as much as I know.
This is Arthur. I kind of have a technical question. If you are supposed to pray in the direction of Mecca, and the world is a globe, how do you know which direction? Do you pick the shortest route, or how do they figure that one out? And the other part of that is, what if you're on a plane and you're changing direction as you go? And you have to pray 5 times a day? How do you solve that conundrum?
I would think that's one of those questions like we were talking about before of interpretation. Sometimes you need an imam to explain it to you. What does that mean? His idea of what to do. And if it's his idea, it means it's God's idea. Typically, they face towards the global position of Mecca. So even though the shortest distance to Mecca would go through the earth, they follow the curvature of the earth. So if there's somewhere, Mecca's here, they would follow the direction that would follow the curvature of the earth. What if you're on the moon? I don't know. I do know that there have been get out of jail free cards for Muslims that are in the military. How do you pray in the middle of a battle? Because there's certain ways that you have to pray. Christians can pray standing up or laying down or falling asleep. Muslims have to be on their carpet, on their knees, bowed. So I would think that there still is a lot of interpretation, and which leaves a good job for a lot of people who want to be interpreters.
This is Ken. How did Jews come to be the pariahs reviled in so many places?
They believe that it is their position in life. It is their job. They are the whipping boys of the world. That's their belief. Just like Muslims believe that everybody's out to get us. I don't know why. Well, Jews know why. Because that's their position in life. And their position is to try to show the world that you don't have to rebel and you don't have to fight back. Now, initially, I would think they caused a little animosity when they came into Palestine and started wiping out nation after nation. We're going to take your land, okay? Jericho, we like that city. We're going to take it, okay? So I would think a lot of the Palestinian people around there were kind of not liking them to begin with. So when Rome and Egypt both conquered that area, and you're Jewish? We don't like Jews. Why? Because I heard you were bad. Don't show your face here anymore. Where did they go? Somewhere else. It's known as the Jewish diaspora, just the leaving. And wherever they went, they usually had money, gold and linen, different types of cloth. And the people that they went to live with didn't really appreciate it. So they were always held in as pariahs. Plus, they were the only ones that you could borrow money from. So it's like, you have to smile to the person who feeds you, but when you have a chance, you show them your hate.
I want to know, what are fatwas? How did they get started? What's their authority? And is there anything comparable in other religions?
A fatwa is a mandate from an imam. Okay, then we're going to kill you. I declare it is permissible to kill you. That's a fatwa. Or it could be, I declare we should not eat pork for 6 days, which they're not supposed to eat pork at all. I declare, that's a command from one of the imams, one of the head guys. It's similar to a papal bull. A bull is a letter from the papacy, the Pope, that says, stop and desist, or we'll kill you. Well, that's what they sent to Martin Luther. He said, and the papal bull was only as strong as the prince of the area who was willing to uphold it. Well, the same thing. A fatwa is only as powerful as the government that is willing to uphold it. So if there's a fatwa against you requiring your death, I would not travel to Saudi Arabia. I would not travel to Iran or Iraq. I think it's safe to go to Mexico. I think it's safe to even go to Russia, because who's going to do it?
I'm curious about the madrasas where students, Islamic kids, are reciting and writing down the Quran in a language that may not be theirs, and how much learning is happening when you're doing something that's just so rote. And is it true that the madrasas are a hotbed for jihadists and radical Islam?
In most cases, a madrasa, an Islamic school, is not for learning. You don't go to a madrasa to learn. You go to a madrasa to memorize the scripture. Now, do they have Bible studies where, what does Surah 5-3 mean? No, they don't do that. If Allah wants you to understand what that means, He'll explain it to you. Or He'll send somebody to explain it to you. But a madrasa is not a place for learning. It's a place for memorizing, and there's different ways of doing that. Now, a madrasa is very similar to the Greek academies. The Greek academies, Socrates had one, and all these other different people had one. They were led by their leader. So whoever was in the academy led by Socrates would learn the Socratic method, would learn about what Socrates believes. And if Socrates says, you should be nice to women, then they all are nice to women when they grow up. But if Socrates says, women are scum, but don't tell anybody I said that, well, when these students get out of there, they believe the same way. A lot of these madrasas, which are usually associated with a Islamic temple, mosque, are more than just a church and a room. It's a whole, something like some of these big churches we have in Salem, even these mega churches, they have different places to do this and do that and do this. And you probably get some clubs that are a little radical, following what the imam wants you to do, but you know what the imam really wants. So you're willing to do what the imam wants, but isn't willing to say. So yeah, there's a lot of radicalism going on there.
Yeah, my name is David. I lived in Saudi Arabia from 1946 to, left over there in the 50s to come back here to go to college, but my father worked for Aramco, and a lot of this seems like total nonsense from what I personally know. We had a lot of friends among the Arabs. They were all Muslim. They were good people. They treated us very well. We treated them very well. They're not a hell of a lot different from anybody else as far as I could tell. And not only that, but they are also an extraordinarily welcoming people. They really treated us quite well. The only thing I'm sorry about is when we first went over there, in some of the souks, I found armor, and I think some of it may have dated back to the Crusades, and I just wish now that I'd bought some of that stuff.
One thing in one of my next lectures is I'll talk about how, there's as many Christians as there are people. There are as many Muslim attitudes as there are Muslims. And I know some Muslims, when I first met them, I was saying like, well, do you have a Arabic Quran? And he looked at me and said, we don't use an Arabic Quran. We translate it into English. And I said, but I was taught. And they say, yeah, you were taught that. But if you really want the message to get across, you got to write it in a way that they can read. So there is a lot of things that I might have said here, which is general mainstream knowledge. But when you get down to your friends and your family or somebody converting, it's a little bit different. It's not quite that way. A lot of people say, I don't want to become religious. Because if you're religious, they hate gays. Are you gay? No, but if I was, I want to be left alone. There are some Christians like that. There are some Christians which say, I know a lot of Muslims that were very close to me. And I've known a few Muslims that I used to play soccer with, and they were very adamant that no girls should be watching us at the soccer field. We should have respect by wearing longer shorts, stuff like that.
Stan, we want to thank you. We wish you had more time. You're going to have to come back and continue this discussion with us.
The problem is, next time it'll be a different subject.
Well, yeah.